in the corner crying.
Okay, we are live. It is 5 o'clock on Tuesday, May 2nd, and we are going to go ahead and get started. This is our 5 o'clock board meeting, and we're going to start by indicating who's here. Karen, why don't you start?
Karen Winder. Chris Wynn.
Kim Chandler.
Julie Jackson.
Todd Hubbard. Rich Nye.
And Nicole McDermott. All right, we have up first, is Clark on?
No, he said if he's able to join, it will be for the 7 o'clock session.
Okay, Connie, we expect soon. I think, and Clark is excused. He may be able to join us later as he is on a business trip. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the capital and construction update. So Don, Justin, and Chris, take it away.
Thank you. We will try and be expeditious this evening. As we know, you have many other important things coming up. Security upgrades continue right now, a little bit before spring break. We're working on the twins of Oakwood and Woodstock. Again, interior finish contractor has done its demolition. They're working on metal framing, working on behind the walls, AV cables, rough electrical, and also some of the storefront that helps to create the separation of open access versus man traps. Again, framing and sheet rock coming along well, recognizing that most of this work will be completed well in advance of the millwork, all of the cabinetry that's set to come in. Millwork is taking an awful long time these days. Again, Woodstock, a sister. We're virtually the same level of construction. We're maybe a week behind on the drywall, so the Woodstock and Oakwood security upgrades are doing quite well. Work continues throughout the district, and again, that's important to acknowledge here that we do work while these new construction projects are very fun, very exciting to look at. Part of this process in giving construction updates is to acknowledge that we're doing work throughout the district in as many networks and in as many buildings as we can and as we can afford. So Westbrook Elementary is getting, we call it Westbrook Lake because Westlake is there temporarily, is getting a re-roofing. It actually started, this slide deck is a little old. We've started on that re-roof, and so we're going to try and correct some leaks. Bonneville Junior is working on some stage lighting and house lighting. The house lighting can be complete as we wait for parts for the stage lighting to come in. And Cottonwood High Auditorium is again still waiting for their equipment to come in. It's due in June. We finally got some acknowledgement from the vendor, and so we'll be able to complete that over this summer. Knocking on wood that I didn't just jinx a container ship full of our AV equipment coming overseas. Arcadia Elementary School, again, getting a re-roof. At the time of this slide, we were about 50% complete. We're a little farther along than that. Arcadia is one of those lovely 1960s schools that had a very jagged roof. I call it very Brady's architecture. And while they look stunning, they leak like nobody's business. And so we're going in and doing some corrective work on an old roofing system. And you can see that as we look at the imagery here, going from an old built-up roof with gravel and crazy slopes that don't drain to membranes that are easier to work on and then re-sloping.
Quick question on that.
Yes, ma'am.
So Arcadia was on the rebuild list. Was it supposed to just be completely rebuilt, and is this going to extend the life of this just for a little bit until we can get to it?
Yeah. So Arcadia was on the consideration list for a complete rebuild. That is correct. When it comes to roofing, roofing is a critical system, meaning you just can't wait because once damage starts to occur on a leaking roof, you've got to fix that roof on your house, on your building, right? It'll rot through any components, and in this case, it could pour straight down onto the floor. So is this a life-extending repair? I wouldn't categorize it as such. It's not a complete re-roof. It's a small section, and it's dealing with a specific project. So you'll see us do roofing projects with urgency because of the critical nature that the roof keeps water out of our building.
Okay, so it's not moving Arcadia any further back on that list?
No, it wouldn't be a substantive change like you're thinking.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So we're working on, and again, these are all sister schools, William Penn, Woodstock, and Oakwood. We're working on improvements to help give more room, give more flexibility, and account for additional students in different classroom sizes that need to take place in these schools. Those bids are on your consent agenda item list tonight. If they go through, we'll start that as quickly after school ends this year, and we will be rushing very quickly to get that done in time for start of school. Make no doubt about it, we have a short summer, and so we're excited to get going on these. Another one before you is Cottonwood High School Teen Center. We have a design that's been out for bid. We started this process, again, worthy cause, great things to provide at our high schools, but we also received a grant, so partial payment of this project through the grant. And again, that's on your consent agenda item. Boiler replacements, HVAC, again, these are the behind the scenes that are critical for us to keep going. We're starting to tick a lot of those off. Most of these are ESSER projects. Hunter High, Hunter Elementary, Magna L, Fox Hills, Copper Hills, Granite Park, here at the GEC, and that also contributes to our GTI and to Wilson. That's all one building, so we are impacting two schools with these upgrades. Cottonwood High School, then Calvin Smith and Beehive are all under progress, all making substantive control changes and circulation and ventilation improvements. Again, you can see that we have a pretty wide reach in the district today. Field turf replacements, again, just a reminder, we'll start these at the end of May as soon as their sports schedules allow. A field replacement, mainly turf at Kearns High. Olympus is the turf carpet itself plus the installation of a water cool down system. Cottonwood High is turf replacement, cool down system replacement, and moving some of the track and field componentry to the end zones to allow for the stadium to be used for track and field. So it's the largest of those three projects. New construction, Justin, I'm out of breath. Can I turn these over to you?
Okay, so for Westlake, we've got lots of things going on. It's an active site out there. And as it's progressing, different areas are in different phases of construction. You'll see that real quickly in the photographs. So we'll just jump in. I'll walk you through that. The first slide here is you see the brick on the right screen, and then on the left is what it covers up. You can kind of see how we put that veneer on there, and they're working in. This is the north face of the north side of the site, all around the gym and the cafeteria and service yard, and so that's progressing nicely. The next slide, you see masonry walls in the service courtyard there on the left, and then on the right, interior metal stud framing in some academic wings. So some areas you got metal studs going up, which eventually will have drywall on both sides, and then you got masonry on the outside. So it's a lot of trades are happening at the same time. Running track and gymnasium is down, and you can see that, at least the decking for that future running track, and then some. You see the stairwell going up to the second level, and the acoustical decking over that area in that main commons courtyard, or corridor, which would be a nice interior space. Roof trusses over the choral room. You can see that there. There's concrete steps for the different levels there in the choral room, and then interior masonry walls in the auditorium for ramps and stairs and those kind of dividers. And then as far as changes, there's no change orders that needed to come before the board this month for Westlake. Any questions on Westlake before we jump in? Chris takes over and jumps in on Skyline and Cypress.
I actually did have a question about Westlake. It occurred to me recently that we have an owner's rep for Cypress and Skyline, but not Westlake. Can you just speak to that?
Yeah, we didn't feel at the time that need was there. We were short is the biggest projects that are a man-eater, if you will. They're just so monstrous. Westlake, we're in good shape right there, and we're feeling very good about Westlake. So that was discussed early on, but it was not something we felt like we needed to pursue.
I guess it's also a much smaller project with less buildings and fields and
It's still a good-sized project,
say
but it's
that.
not as big as a high school. You're right.
Yeah.
Not quite as complicated. And-
There's no pool.
There's no pool. Thank you. True.
Okay, are you
What-
going to
what-
continue to advance?
What would you, oh, Don, can you-
Okay, that would be awesome. I've always thought of you that way, I just didn't want to say it out loud. All right, so, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity again to present. Going through,
You may want to pull the mic because online, there you go.
okay, is that better?
What assurances do we offer that we are not crossing a line or will not be crossing a line in the future?
None.
We'll ask those questions later.
Trying to turn my volume off.
Okay, awkward silence over.
Public education is a government institution. We are beholden.
Thank you for the opportunity to present. Skyline High School, now that winter has at least temporarily abated, hopefully for a few months, we've made quite a bit of significant progress, especially on the structure of the facility. Something I might have mentioned in our last meeting, we can go ahead and advance the slide a little bit to describe what we're talking about. With the tilt-up structure, especially on an occupied site, sometimes it's very challenging in order to get all of the panels made because they have, rather than on a site like Cypress where we have room all the way around the building to do all the panels in a certain sequence and strike them all up at once. Because of the nature of Skyline and the very restricted nature of the site, they only have a couple of spots where they can pour panels and then they have to walk them around. So in working with Hughes, the general contractor, what we've done is not only accelerated the steel, but they've actually put 2 different steel companies in there erecting steel. And so now the steel activities are moving much, much faster than they were. And actually right now, some of them are slightly ahead because they've chosen to move that fast. And actually starting today and over the next week, we're pouring most of those internal decks. And so what you'll see is you'll see kind of the building being built from the inside out for a little while they finish doing some of the rest of those erection pads. Thank you for the next one. Within the administration itself, you can see the ductwork's being put in, the metal framing is moving forward, and some of the other activities to make it a little bit more like a building. And you can see on the south side of the administration, the slabs being poured. Those walls are getting ready to be tilted up. Actually, all those ones are actually poured. Those were a little bit, this next week thing is actually last week. So as in order to meet our compliance with presenting to the board, you're seeing a lot of things that are a couple weeks out of date. So a lot of these work is already being performed. And then the next slide, you can actually see where the slab for the cafeteria is being poured, where the old gymnasium was sitting. And then we're actually using that as a waste slab for some of those eastern side parts of the classroom buildings. And a lot of this deck actually got poured today, and some of the deck will continue to be poured the rest of the week. So these will actually be concrete. We'll be moving to putting on the roof deck over the top of these and moving into getting ready to put the roof on. And this is kind of what I was describing in terms of the academic wings being internally structurally steel much further ahead and getting ready to put the final deck and the metal roof on over the next few weeks. And that's kind of Skyline right now. There's been a lot of effort going on. The only change for Skyline was an administrative change to make some changes and increase the Bluetooth capability of the audiovisual system in the new gymnasium. Any questions on Skyline?
I just wanted to thank you for, thinking through getting that building, the metal structures up and building from the inside out to keep us on schedule. I think that is a huge deal for this community who's so tired. So thank you for being sensitive to that and pushing that.
Yeah, great. Now, the contractor had some really good thought processes on how to try to do that, because we've been having lots of very serious discussions. Okay, so if we can't speed up your tilts, what can we do? Because that was our initial solution, was to try to ask them to come up with other places to pour slabs, so.
Yeah, it was a great way to adjust to our tricky winter that we hadn't planned on. So, awesome.
Maybe one of these years we'll get spring again. So moving into Cypress, actually Cypress is actually moving very, very well. One of our biggest concerns over the last, especially going through February and into March, and, the 106th day of January that we had in early April was if you've ever been out to the Cypress site, the mud was very, very deep. We've been very pleased at how quickly, I think, Justin, would that be a fair way to say that, how quickly some of that mud has dried out? And they've been able to make some real progress on some items. A lot of the progress in the last month, because of the concerns of the mud and some of the extended late winter conditions we had, is a lot of the progress, as you'll see from the photos, moving into it, a lot of the progress has been done at both the auditorium building and the athletic building. If you recall from the site, we're basically working those two as the longest lead items, and then working on the academic wing, connecting the two together. And so you will see progress where you're going to see metal studs and framing and then bare slabs. So that's just the different progress as the trades working through the site. Thank you, Don. The third floor mezzanine and some of these other areas that are continually being poured. A lot of concrete work going on right now, especially since it's been actually having 4 days of sunshine in a row has been amazing. And also some of the same things where the steel actually got ahead of the concrete tilts, and so because of that we were able to set mechanical units not just in the auditorium but in the end of the academic wing next to that. This is our new dirt dance floor that we're going to be using. So that there's a lot of concrete being poured in the auditorium throughout, and getting the stage placed and moving into a situation where we'll be able to move into the steel framing there shortly. Thank you. As you can see, this is part of what I was talking about. You can see where the metal framing is already up 3 stories as on those new tilted wings, in order to just keep the steel guy moving and keeping him on site. Thank you. And then actually, when you go over to the gymnasium, then you actually see things like drywall and other things being able to be done in order to keep, once again, one of the most important things in a schedule is when you get a trade on site is never let them leave. If they know that they're going to be going there for the next year plus, and nope, you're going to move from this wing to this wing to this wing, and then it's just easier. It's easier on your trades. It's easier on your relationship with your trades to know that they're not going to have 2 days where, okay, where do we send our guys today? Or so anytime we can hold on to the trades, and that's the plan with both steel stud and mechanical trades here. And then one of the coolest things they have, you see the big C that's going to go on the outside of the drama studio that they have been working on, and that's kind of our report for Cypress. Any questions on Cypress?
Do first apologize for my unprofessional interruption of your presentation. I was actually trying to notice my computer was not on silent, trying to avoid an interruption. Somehow I made it read from an email I sent to Rich yesterday, so apologize for that. But I do have one question, and that is, I think we have rescheduled our tour of the Cypress site. Has a new date for that been decided on yet?
Yeah, let me see if I can summarize the discussion from Stacy. It's looking best to actually parse it into 2 dates. The group is so busy that we don't think we can get everyone together. There's discussions, I believe, of a May 24 and then also out into June. And so we're happy to accommodate that. In many respects, a smaller group is a little bit easier. We don't have to yell as loud. We don't have to herd as much on the site for safety reasons. And so I would expect Stacy would be out trying to firm up the dates and who would attend on those 2 dates. Sometime late this week is going to be my best guess. Okay?
Just making sure I didn't miss it.
No.
I had the same question and also was thinking, and I need to go see Westlake too. Maybe we could think about that too. I just got an email.
You just got an email about that.
I'd like to apologize for not being updated on my email. Up to date.
Sorry, Ben's just working during the meeting. All right.
All right, any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. All right, we're going to go ahead and turn the time over to Rick Anthony, our Assistant Superintendent. This was a follow-up to a discussion item that we had during our a study session that we had about dual language immersion. As we have gone through some of our closures from last year, we've had dual language immersion discussions and issues come up, and we've asked them to address those. So Rick's going to give us his best thinking.
Well, our best thinking. Thank you, Board President, board members, executive leadership. Yes, and that was a great intro. Thank you. It is an ongoing problem solving here around dual language immersion and size of school. And so that study session we shared just kind of laid out the challenges, the dilemmas, and didn't have a definitive answer for you, and honestly don't tonight as well. Just have some additional information and sharing with you some of the things we've talked through and explored. Perhaps giving you a preview of our next areas to start looking at, and we'll plan to bring more information back to you. So first couple of slides here, I think I just wanted to show this one, just purposefully remembering some of the strategic plan elements. I think the visual I gave you last month didn't have academic proficiency in the center, and I said that, but I wanted to show that to you. As a reminder, under our academic priority, that objective of personalized competency-based learning and offering specialized courses, this is where we see DLI fitting into our strategic plan. Objective of tonight is taking a look at the balance of school autonomy around programs and the trend or pattern that we've had with DLI, but also how are we balancing stability, equity when the size of school starts getting smaller. So our 3 big challenges that we named, there's probably a lot of other challenges, but the 3 that we wanted to focus on or thinking through is the small enrollment in DLI schools that results in one traditional class with 2 DLI classes. So what we talked through in the larger study session was essentially this issue and the challenges or the problems that it can occur with just the one traditional class. Wanted to remind the board of our history of school autonomy when it comes to DLI, meaning putting DLI programs in schools came from the school level up to the district. That was school level ask. We took a look at it and approved those. And then this challenge around size of program and getting smaller, not necessarily being as acute for parents as perhaps it can be for teachers and administrators, and I'll elaborate there for a minute. The big challenge becomes a scheduling challenge. It becomes a teacher challenge around how to navigate when there's only one traditional class. From a parent perspective, DLI is available to them and they're able to access that. So just highlighting a little bit of this district level, the school level, and then even a parent level perspective that we have in play. So what we took a look at was with that one traditional class. So a lot of this is really just speaking to those small schools that have DLI, that have the 2 teachers who are teaching DLI together and a 3rd teacher doing traditional. We have historically helped those schools problem solve how to address perhaps some of the issues they have, whether it's our traditional class is too high of enrollment, to our traditional class has certain needs that are making some challenges, to all kinds of, mostly around scheduling and meeting student needs issues when you're getting small. I've underlined may there. So schools with an enrollment size that results in only one traditional class may use a regrouping strategy. That's how it has been. We explored, what if that may was a must? You must regroup out at your schools to try and address traditional student classroom dilemmas. Let me elaborate. So just as a reminder, regrouping is a word that we've been using around the two-teacher model. Students are together with the same group all day, half the time in DLI and half in English. So when you're really small, like a Spring Lane, you were seeing some of that, where the DLI students were together all day, had the same teacher, but the teacher taught in Chinese for half and then in English for half. That's an example of problem solving for really small. What we're speaking to mostly tonight is the three-teacher model. Students are together with the same group of DLI half day and then go to the English classroom the half day. So it's two teachers paired, one DLI language, one traditional. They're exchanging students at half day. And then the third is your traditional. So, I'll have a visual for you as well.
The traditional is the same kids all day with the same teacher?
Correct.
In English?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, correct. So just a reminder on regrouping. Regrouping is where you start to mix that traditional class. Let me show you some visuals. So the historical looks like this. You'll have your language DLI, your English DLI, and then your traditional. And so the red students are with language DLI in the morning, they go to English in the this is historically how we manage this. We offer a lot of solutions around regrouping, which is playing with that third class, that traditional teacher, where they're with that teacher all day. We have those students move to the English teacher, and I'll show you a visual of that. Before I get there, though, just want to remind, we hit this in the study session, but wanted some big bullets here of effective implementation, proper practices with DLI. English teachers must have a DLI English teacher training. So that teacher that's paired, the English DLI teacher, receives some professional learning and training in DLI. Obviously not in language, but just around what that means to be that partner teacher. It's around collaboration, and there's this element of a literacy block, and I'm going to get to that. That's what we ran up against when we thought, well, gosh, why not change the may to a must to help alleviate this? That literacy block ends up creating some complexity there that has us second guessing whether that's worth a requirement to regroup. All teachers must follow DLI instructional plans. Students must be coded correctly for the APPLE. That's an assessment that they take to measure how much they've learned in language. Teachers must collaborate together in a PLC. And obviously, those two teachers that are sharing are doing a lot of collaboration.
What about this makes it hard for them the students to be coded correctly for the APPLE?
It's not that hard.
Okay,
It's
so that's
just one
not
of those
really a big
things-
concern.
Yeah, it's not a big concern.
It's just something we
It's
got to
just
be
something
aware
you
of.
have to pay attention to, yes. Minor. Might not even be worth a bullet there. So traditional visual here. This visual is where you're looking to try and take that third traditional block in yellow and give that teacher some mixing of students, and give those students some mixing as well, some regrouping, if you will. You're able to do that, but you're not able to do that cleanly. You're able to do it for one of your two groups of DLI. So what I've tried to show in this visual, you'll see there's 3 columns again, and you'll see the 2 half days again. Almost need a laser pointer here. This English block that I described becomes part of your challenge. So the English block is divided into a morning and afternoon, and that's received in different ways. You are able to regroup half of your DLI students, but you can't fully regroup all DLI students. So the question starts to become, is the challenges worth the gains because of this master schedule and the blocks around literacy? So I'll walk you through. DLI students in blue here that are with the language teacher in the afternoon, half of those could go to the English teacher, one. Usually in the other model, they would all go. Half could go to that teacher, and then the other half could go to the other, which results in half of the students who are all in the traditional English teacher's classroom moving over, but then back in the afternoon. You're not able to do that with red because your English-only students need that second literacy block. I've linked in this presentation to several different ways that we've helped with the maze, depending on the enrollment. So all these variables start to come in, like how many students are there? What are students' needs in the classes, etc. So we try and help principals with a bunch of ways or options they could regroup depending on their specific location, scenario, the students at this school, how many they are, all of the variables that could come into play. Pros of regrouping or this model. Go ahead.
Sorry. In this scenario, then, the blue students are learning in the target language, science, and math, and the red students are learning in the target language, also science and math.
Correct.
Okay.
The learning piece for me in this was they have a literacy piece both in their language acquisition and in their English. So it's not all English is in English. There is a literacy element that
To their language.
it's divided.
Okay.
And this is what I've tried to show. And these little green boxes aren't really standing out, but just trying to show that. And the blue would get that. And so with the red in this model, it's just making sure the English only students get both of those blocks of literacy. Pros of going around regrouping is you can potentially improve the balance of your enrollment numbers in the English portion of instruction. You can improve opportunities for interaction. So those downsides of we're the traditional group in this group, it's just able to mitigate that some. Not entirely, but some. Improved ability to divide students with special needs between more than one teacher. So oftentimes, the reality is in this model, you'll hear oftentimes students that have additional needs aren't necessarily in DLI, and they're with the traditional. So you're able to organize in ways where they can see some different looks, different teachers, be with different students as well. All pros. Go ahead, Julie.
And when when our principals, get their lists of who's accepted into DLI, is there if I'm a special needs kid, I can get in DLI?
Absolutely.
Okay. Or I have a 504 plan.
Absolutely.
I'm in. Okay.
You'll hear anecdotally, and I could get you the data, but you'll just hear anecdotally many times, and students who have a lot of additional needs do not tend to enroll in DLI. But not purely, and there's no restrictions. It's just a trend that you see on the aggregate. On the con side, so here we're trying to illustrate that you can alleviate it some. But some of the cons you start to get is the traditional teacher loses some flexibility. So it requires now increased collaboration amongst 3 teachers, which it's hard to say collaboration's a con, but from a logistics standpoint, there's something to be considered there. All teachers must follow the DLI instructional plan rather than just the 2. This results in a loss of flexibility for that traditional teacher. more transition time when you're moving kids across teachers. That's not crazy or unheard of, though. We see upper grades who will have some movement amongst teachers, where sixth graders might have math with Mr. Anthony and English with Miss Jackson. That's not unique. English teachers must teach literacy in 2 distinct blocks of instructional time, which includes 2 different units. Additional complexity for the traditional teacher in lesson design and delivery. So traditional teacher, in this view, has to split their blocks into 2. In this, they could just do English for that entire time. They don't have to do a morning and an afternoon literacy. I keep saying English, but literacy is the better word here. So it does take away flexibility from the traditional teacher. So what we're weighing here is some opportunities to do some regrouping, but not purely, as pros, cons being a loss of flexibility and additional complexity for that traditional teacher. So, because of that, our feeling was we probably ought to keep it at a may, and we probably ought to keep it at, depending on the size of your school, depending on your classes, depending on the students you have, depending on the teachers you have, you've got some unique circumstances that you have to problem solve. So switching to a must would take some of that power and ability to address that unique element at each school. So the idea of, well, why not just require some regrouping and make it a must? As we dug into it, we learned for all of these reasons, a may is still the better choice, and to continue to problem solve with each school on different ways they could address it. Some schools may choose a look like this because the circumstances are right. They have just the right sizes, they have the right teachers, they have the right everything that they feel like, yes, this is the solution we need. We just weren't comfortable with saying, no, that's the solution that will work for everyone. I did link in your presentation that takes you out to a Google Doc that shows you several variations that even get more complex than this version I'm showing you here. But it's just an example of how we're trying to give principals some ideas on how they might do this if it works for them.
Just a comment about this. This is how William Penn handles their DLI program, and they, from year to year, switch even which grades are on which model based on, it's really, every year they are looking at numbers, and it changes year to year. And the thing that I see that makes it work there is that they have their community council is really involved in that decision, and also their teachers are really involved. It's a big collaboration because the teachers, they prefer the traditional method by far. It's so much easier on them, and they see the benefits to that. And the parents, they are pushing what the social needs of their kids are, and so they speak to that. And so when both of those needs are at the table, there seems to be this negotiation that comes out right in the wash. And so I think that parent involvement piece, because I think our teachers I'm confident our teachers will have a voice. I'm not always confident that our parents, are confident speaking up about whatever they think or being involved in it. So I think that's something to have on the radar.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I think it keys into these challenges that we've named, where moving forward, these are becoming more clear for us, and that we're going to have to grapple with. And it's around interests, if you will. And Julie, you talked about the teacher interest and the parent interest, and obviously you have the same interest, what's best for kids, but there may be some different perspectives on what that means and how that works. And that's true, I would say, even just globally around the schools that are small enrollment that have the DLI programs. You have some real logistical scheduling challenges that aren't necessarily something that the parent has to live. But the principal's trying to navigate on class size and resources and how do I make this work. We as a district also have, as we're taking a look at enrollment size, declining enrollment, et cetera, have some decisions to make around our historical, this is a school decision around having this program. If we were to have, and we haven't had a school come wanting to take in DLI in many, many years, but if we did, certainly something that we would have to grapple with was the size of their school. And even if they're saying, we're small and we really want that, is that something that ultimately we're going to, okay, knowing what we know now and all the challenges on that size?
So for my part, I mean, I've talked to you about this before. I worry that in that model where you put the may, just because I've seen some of this, I appreciate hearing that William Penn has really made this work. I worry that the traditional teachers just get walked over. They're 1 out of 3, and the other 2 are going to say, oh, no, it's working fine. And the burden, the additional burden, is generally on that traditional teacher. And I worry because we're talking about the achievement, and the kids that are generally in the traditional class are going to be the ones that have the 504s and the IEPs and the, that are English language learners, largely from, and I'm not just talking about our Spanish learners, we're talking about the ones who are coming from a lot of other countries. And that is a concern for both behaviors that teacher has to deal with, as well as accommodations that is very overwhelming to a traditional teacher. And then when you throw in 35 kids where your other 2 classes are at 25, that's a huge burden on those teachers. So I don't want to see these teachers getting walked all over and being abused, basically, in that respect. I really do want to encourage them. Look, if you're getting down to 3, and if we see an imbalance, then maybe we do need to, we need to maybe think about it as a board to step in and say, okay, I told Rick this, and I don't know, I'm going to make some people mad, sorry, but I'm just going to say it. I think if we get down to that point, I would rather see them say, okay, we're going to have 1 class of DLI. 30 kids are all we are going to accept, unless enrollment goes up in your school. And if you have only 2 classes per grade, then you get to have a split class. Just because we can't do this to our traditional students, that's not fair. It's not fair for them. And I am speaking, for anybody who doesn't know, I am speaking as a parent of DLI kids. I am really, really concerned about our traditional kids and that achievement that happens, and that gap that we see with that. And maybe that's something also to think about, is just that, do we need to, as a board, say if there are any future DLI requests, that you have to have 4 classes per grade before it's even going to be, you can even think about it, because it can't be a way. I think a lot of schools, especially our East Side schools, who are handling it okay, to give them credit, but I think they looked at it as a recruitment. Oh, we can bring more kids into our school, and while it may have brought in a little, it did not work the same way that they thought it would. Is that fair to say?
Yes, but I would say that the places where we're hearing we would like a DLI is in the Cypress network. That's where I'm hearing that, which I'm not hearing it much in my area. And the other thing I want to tell you is that, it's just 1 school, and this is only my perception, and, take it or leave it. At William Penn, the teachers who advocate for the traditional teachers are the DLI teachers. They see that they have that there are tricky things going on for the traditional teachers, and they stand up for them. And I mean, they have a strong community, so that's not the case in every school, but I would hope that's what we'd strive for anyway, with great leadership. But so I just wanted to mention that part of it.
I just want to hear that we're, like, if we continue to have this, let's make sure that we're, let's send them to Penn. Okay, this is how it can work. This is how, these guys have been able to get it to work. I know there are some other schools in other districts that have been able to get that type of model to work. So having them observe this and figure this out is, to me, important, instead of them saying, oh, no, we're not going to do it, just flat out.
I would say that there are things that are working at Penn, but there are things that are not working at Penn too. And what's not working is the traditional program. And what's working is when they mix, it's sort of like, well, at least we're doing this. But the optimal would be to have 2 classes of traditional students. That's the optimal thing that would help. So it feels like a Band-Aid to me.
Okay.
And again, that's my perception. It would be interesting to see what other parents at William Penn had to say. But it does feel like, well, at least this is a bare minimum fix, you know? And also remember that at William Penn, you still have a lot of people who are leaving the school because they don't want DLI and they don't trust the traditional program to be able to meet their kids' needs. So they leave and even go out of our district to a charter school.
Board President, I came at it at first from a narrative that you described around the traditional teacher, and you explained it well around the needs in that class and how that can be challenging. And even went to the surveys we conducted with principals around what works, what doesn't work. And a lot of that rested on collaboration. It wasn't until I dug a little bit further that I learned that traditional teacher, although there are those challenges, might prefer what they have that year to the loss of flexibility and the increased complexity. And that's where we came back around to the May.
Sorry, I wanted to add one more thing before, sorry, just to what I was saying. Also at Penn, the growth that the traditional teachers are getting is super high. They were the highest growth in the district. The traditional programs are doing great. It's a perception, which I think is important to this discussion because it's not just always about what's actually happening. It's about the perception's really important. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
That's okay. I just had a question on the class regrouping. You have grades 4 and 5. So does this not work for the younger?
It may. I just picked an example,
okay.
just trying to illustrate it. It's not as pure and easy as you think. There's some layers of complexity. Same with this this link. If you pull that up and look at those, I wanna plug our curriculum and instruction department. They've worked pretty hard to brainstorm with schools around. Well, this could help. You could try this one. You could try this. Here's some examples.
Okay. And I also agree with Nicole. I think we have to have a minimum enrollment standard to even take on that program. I think we'd be setting a school up maybe for failure if we don't have that minimum requirement. And I don't know exactly what that looks like right now, but I think we should look at that for future.
We've learned over some time that anyone coming on, and again, no one has requested that. Mm-hmm. It's been Spanish. Spanish has been our latest ones, but still it's been several years. That, I think, is easier for us than, hey, you're getting too small. We need to consider something here.
For sure. Thank you.
Any other comments, thoughts? Go ahead.
So just back to the comment Julie made about what she hears is that people in the Cypress network are interested in having a DLI program there. And as you know, I asked you about this already, but that's what I've heard as well, just from parents in the Cypress network, that they would like to have had that opportunity and they don't. What would it take? What would they need to do to get enough attention on it to try to create a program there?
I think community council and principal bringing that forward, saying, hey, we would like to explore and look at that, and then partnering with us and certainly we're going to give them some lessons learned, especially around school size. But the principal and their school community council reaching out to me or curriculum instruction who supervises DLI and starting that conversation.
Julie?
I think this is a huge issue, and I really appreciate you delving into it. There were a lot of other issues we brought up too in our last meeting. Can you give me like what's the plan or the thinking or surrounding addressing, other issues too? Or is there one?
We started with this one, and we'll get, as we dig into those, we can bring some of those out. And as you are reminded or hear of those, please put them back to my radar. This was my largest takeaway. My largest takeaway from that presentation was the challenge of the one traditional classroom and the complexity that surrounds around school autonomy and district decisions and school size as well. And so we really just transparently focused on that piece. Happy to have further conversations, look at other avenues, other things that perhaps were not, or didn't make note of or didn't think of, and looking in those two.
I think the issue that I would like to look at across the district is, is there need for consolidation of different programs so that we don't have to do this? Because again, what I've seen is this is, it works, but it's Band-Aid, it's not optimal. And I think the question is, can we do better?
Right.
If we adjusted where those programs are or something like that.
We know too, and you're reminding me, thank you, of the saturation of Spanish in that Granger
That I'm
area.
thinking of
That's
that.
what we were talking about.
I'm really
yeah.
thinking of that.
And I think that is tied to this. It's back to that larger question of school size. We know in that cluster, we have some schools who are smaller, probably not small, but 3 teacher small, that if we did consolidate, what would that then mean? How would that then connect to the larger issue around declining enrollment as well? So we're going to come prepared to speak to some of these bigger pieces and how those dots start to run into each other, if you will.
Okay. And then the other issue that I'm interested in studying is, I would really love to have something sort of like a rights and responsibilities that we have for PBL for district and school communities, so that it's very clear, especially to a school community, what their rights and responsibilities are for their DLI population.
Around DLI. Mhm.
And that it's understood what community councils can do and what principals can do. And I just would like that to be very clear. I think that's been a confusion that's been really frustrating and has also made things like slide through the cracks because no one knew who was really making the decision.
Some guardrails perhaps around May. So if we're saying, no, okay, May is not the
Well,
right issue, the May,
and other
what are
issues-
some structures around the May?
Other issues like how many kids do we accept in a class? Is that determined by the district or is that determined by the school? Or do we,
I think, Julie,
I'm
that's
trying to
part of a
think.
conversation that we need to have as a board. Are we going to make that decision? Because right now, it's the school decision.
I
So-
completely agree. I was hoping that we would get, I guess what I'm asking for is recommendations that we then as a board can discuss.
So, okay, so this sounds like something that maybe we need to bring back.
Yeah, I'm
gonna-
just trying to bring up
okay.
what the things to bring back are.
Okay.
Is this
so,
not the
yeah,
right
let's-
time?
Let's talk about it and let's kind of get a list of things.
And that's it.
Okay, thanks. We're going to cut it off because we've got to head to an executive session. Thank you so much, Rick, and to all the folks that worked on that and kind of brainstorming this. It obviously is a problem that we see and that I think we're going to have to revisit again and perhaps again and again.
We're planning on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have anything to add? Sorry. Okay. All right. We have a need of an executive session for the purpose of collective bargaining. And so with that, I will entertain a motion.
I move that we move to executive session for the purpose of collective bargaining. Did I say that right?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to move to executive session for the purpose of collective bargaining. We need to do a roll call vote, and please say yay. Oh. Okay, so we'd like to ask, can we include potential litigation? Would you like to amend your motion? Or do we need to vote on that one first? Can we amend it?
No, you haven't voted, so you can amend it.
Okay, amend it.
So I'd like to amend my motion. I would like to now move that we move to executive session for the purpose of collective bargaining and potential litigation.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to move to executive session for the purpose of collective bargaining and potential litigation. This is a roll call vote. Please state your name. Julie, go ahead.
Julie Jackson, yes.
Kim Chandler, yes.
Connie Burgess, yes.
Chris Nguyen, yes.
Karen Winder, yes.
Nicole McDermott, yes. Right, we will reconvene upstairs. We're going to give you guys about 10 minutes to saunter up there.